Hey guys, welcome back to Reading with Mo. I know this video has been a long time coming, so better late than never, I guess. This is my wrap up for all the books that I read and finished in the month of November. I was participating in Nonfiction November, and I planned on telling you guys all about these books at the beginning of December, but like I've mentioned before, with everything going back into lockdown again, I just have not had the time to sit down and record any videos in the past couple of weeks, but I'm glad that I have the time now to sit down and talk with you guys about my books. First, before we get into the books, I want to mention if you haven't yet, check out my Depop account that I just made. I have a whole bunch of used books that I've put up on there. If you guys are interested in checking them out, if you see something you want to purchase, just let me know. You know, you can complete it through the app. I'm still learning how to use Depop, so bear with me. Also, don't forget to check out, I just made also during this past week a new Instagram account specifically dedicated to books, so a whole complete Bookstagram account. So go follow me there. I'll leave the links to both of those down below, but let's get into the books. So a few stats first before we get into the books on what I read, since I think I want to start doing that a little bit more in my wrap-ups, is talking about some of the stats. So I finished and I completely finished 12 books in the month of November. One of them was a DNF, which I always forget to talk about the books that I didn't finish, but I feel like that's kind of interesting. You guys might want to know that, so I'm gonna try and remember to include those books. And then the rest of that's not included in the whole 12 that I read. And I wanted to read a lot of nonfiction. I was participating in Nonfiction November. I did not get to all of the books that I was planning on, but I did get to a good amount of them. So I read 6 of the 10, I think it was, that I had included on my original TBR list, and I'm still planning on getting to the other ones. I think I'm like reading 1 or 2 of them at the moment still. So let's start off with the DNF. The book that I started and did not finish was My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. This book I've had for a while now. This is like a contemporary fiction book. I checked out the audiobook of this through my library, and I had probably listened to the first like hour or two, and I just wasn't really invested in it. It wasn't holding my attention, and I just don't know if Frederick Bachman is really an author that I'm really into. I've read one other book by this author before, Britt Marie Was Here, and I think at the time I had given that book like 4 stars, but now that I think about it more, it's kind of more like 3 stars, and she actually does make an appearance in the beginning of this book. This book is also told from the perspective of the main character. Her name's Elsa. She is 7 years old, and I just find that adult books written for adults from the perspective of younger kids just aren't really something that I'm into. Like, I like middle grade and young adult, but for some reason like this and Room by Emma Donoghue, they just don't really appeal to me. I didn't really get far into this book, so like I said, can't wait to give you guys like a full like accounting of what this book is about. But we're following Elsa, I mentioned before, and her grandmother is, I do remember like a lot of her grandmother being in the storyline, and her grandmother is very older, and I think she's about to die or something, because that's what it mentions in the plot. I'm not giving away any spoilers here. And that sets her on this journey of something. I don't know, it just really didn't capture my attention, so I wasn't going to force myself to finish it when I wasn't enjoying it. So I think I'm going to talk about the books in the order of what I liked least to what I liked the most. So there's only one book that I gave 1 star in the month of November, and I rarely give books ever 1 star, and I was really disappointed because this is a book that I did request a review copy of, and I just did not like it, and that was How to Read Nonfiction Like a Professor by Thomas C. Foster, a smart, irreverent guide to biography, history, journalism, blogs, and everything in between. He also wrote How to Read Literature Like a Professor, which I do own, and I enjoyed that book a lot. It's one that I have plans to reread in the future. I just did not like this book like at all. I really thought it was a perfect book to start the month off with, because I was planning on reading so much nonfiction, and I feel like I can always improve my reading skills, and I thought this was going to be something like that for me, but I would say this book was so boring, and I feel like I didn't get anything out of it. I got halfway into the book and I was like, maybe the second half will get better, and that just did not happen. I guess the only major takeaway I can give you guys in the summary that he basically says is to kind of be distrustful of anything you read. Like, don't trust anything you read just blindly, which, I mean, I could just tell you that and wait, not have you read this whole like 300 page, 250 page book. Question everything you read, and you will have basically gotten the whole gist of what this whole book is about in 2 seconds. So yeah, I would definitely not recommend this book. I did not like it and I will not be holding on to it. There were no books that I gave 2 stars to, but there were quite a few that I gave 3 stars to, which I feel like those ones are so hard to talk about because 3 stars isn't bad, but it's not like the best reading either. For me, 3 stars is like this book was good, but it's probably not super memorable, and except in rare cases, I'm probably not going to be recommending these books to anybody. So let's get into those. The first one we have is Landline by Rainbow Rowell. Rainbow Rowell is known for her Eleanor and Park books and Fangirl, and I know she's had like some controversy around her as an author, which I don't want to get into now, but this is her adult novel. So in this book, we're following our main character, Georgie. She is a TV writer, and she's having some marital problems. And so she's, during Christmas, she has this opportunity to work on this very big opportunity for a show. She's been waiting her whole life for this type of opportunity, and her husband is supportive of her leaving the family during this time to work on it. And it's just like on top of already a whole bunch of marriage issues they were having. So while she's staying at her parents' house, she has her old phone from when she was in like high school, and it somehow is letting her, when she calls her husband, or he calls her, she's talking to her husband from the past, and she's trying to figure out if she should change things, keep things the same. I just really did not like the character of her husband. Like, I just didn't like him, so that made this kind of a rougher book to read, because you're supposed to want their marriage to work, right? But as we're getting these flashbacks to how her husband was and how he is now, I'm just like, he's kind of not a great guy anyway, so it kind of makes it hard to root for their marriage when you don't even really care for one of the people that's involved in it. I don't know, maybe someone else would have better luck with this kind of book, because honestly, like, contemporary romance centered kind of books aren't usually my thing anyway. But this one had, like, you know, that kind of added element that made it a little bit more interesting, and that she's able to talk to her husband in the past. And so yeah, 3 stars. It was okay. Maybe you guys would like it, maybe not. I just can't highly recommend it. Next we have What Alice Forgot by Leanne Moriarty. She is the author of Big Little Lies, which is a book I really loved and enjoyed. So I've been wanting to read another book by her. I read actually The Husband's Secret and Big Little Lies. I will say this is my least favorite, or I don't know. Nine Perfect Strangers was also not the most interesting book to me as well either, so they're both kind of tied. This one kind of gives me similar vibes to the other one I just talked about, Landline, in terms of like what I didn't like about it. So we're following, in this one, the main character, her name is Alice, and she is 29. She has been newly married. She's in love with her husband. She's pregnant with her first kid. She suddenly comes to, she's on the floor of the gym. She's headed to the hospital. Little does she know, she actually has like some type of concussion or something, and it's caused her to forget the last 10 years of her life. So she's now 39, and she doesn't remember anything about having her kids, anything that's happened in the past 10 years. Her and her husband are actually getting a divorce, and everything is just like completely going wrong in her life. She's trying to figure out how all of a sudden she became super skinny. Her sister doesn't really talk to her very much. Like I said, her husband and their relationship are not working at all, and they're seeming like they're going to be getting a divorce, and so she has to decide how to fix everything, you know, what's going on, fill in the gaps of everything. Like, the premise sounds like it'd be really interesting, and honestly I feel like this would make a really good movie, maybe like a Lifetime movie or something. But yeah, it was just okay, you know, similar along the lines to Landline, where I just didn't really care too much about I wasn't invested enough in their marriage to really care which way it was going, so that made it hard for me to really care too much about the book overall. Next we have Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. I think this book actually is a movie, now that I completely forgot about it. I need to watch it if it is, but this one also was 3 stars, and this one is a mystery thriller. I know there's a lot of books that kind of try to do similar things that this book did. We're following 2 strangers, Guy and Charles, and they're both on this train ride, and they both have someone in their lives who they are just not in a good relationship with. So one of them, he really despises his dad and he wants to kill his dad, and the other one, he is trying to get a divorce from his wife so he can marry the woman that he's now in love with, but she is giving him a hard time because he's going to be coming into some money soon. So the one who doesn't like his dad, that guy's name's Charles. So Charles wants them to basically like make this pact where they'll each kill the person that they despise, and it'll be perfect because nobody will suspect them since they're two random strangers and they have no ties or connections. And Guy is like, you know, this is crazy, I'm not going to do this, and writes it off. But actually his wife turns up dead, and he is now pretty much being blackmailed into having to commit the other murder and keep the pact with this guy. It's definitely an interesting book. There were definitely times where the book made me feel like unsettled and uncomfortable, and like I guess that's a good feeling to feel when you're reading mystery books, but overall it just wasn't like my most favorite mystery book. It was okay, it wasn't bad. I think I would probably give this more like 3.5 stars, but I think just like a lot of the decisions that our main character that we're following, Guy, was making were just like not very believable to me, and like so totally completely opposite of decisions that I feel like a rational person would make in this kind of situation. So that's kind of what brought the rating down a little bit for me. Next, we have Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney has been talked about so much, I feel like, this year, especially her other book, Ordinary People, which I want to give a read for myself. This one, it was okay, 3 stars as well, as we're still in 3-star books. So in this book, we're following 2 girls that are in college that are best friends, and they end up getting involved in this weird relationship with another artist, with an artist and her husband, this other couple. And honestly, this book, I considered DNFing probably a couple, actually since it's an audiobook, so a couple hours into it, I thought, you know, I'm not really feeling this book, and I'm not really enjoying it that much, but it was so short, I was like, let me just finish it, and it kind of got a little bit interesting at some parts, but it just overall was a little bit boring to me. I'm still interested in reading Ordinary People by Sally Rooney, but I'm not like itching to grab it anytime super soon, just based off of my feelings coming out of this book. Like, I thought it was just okay, but I just honestly didn't care too much for the characters. I didn't really care about the decisions and things that they were making and doing. I think this is one of those cases where you read characters making decisions and doing things where you're like, it's just totally obvious that these things aren't going to work out, and so you're just like there along for the ride to see how things are going to end up, even though you know things aren't going to probably end up well. Yeah, I don't really know what much more to say about this. This is why I hate reviewing books that I give 3 stars to. Then we have an audiobook that I listened to that I don't have the physical copy of, and that is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I've been seeing this book everywhere. It's a very hyped up, I think it was part of the Goodreads Choice Awards this year too, and it's a mystery thriller, a close circle one. I was really anticipating this book because the premise of it sounded so interesting. So we're following this wedding party, and we're following them all like the day before the wedding, and we know someone's been murdered. I can't remember now if we know who was murdered or not. You don't know who was murdered at the beginning, so you're going back and forth in time figuring out who was murdered and how and who did it, and because it's only like a close circle of people that it could possibly be. It's just like the wedding party pretty much is staying on this island that is off the coast of Ireland. It was definitely an atmospheric book, 5 stars for that, and it was interesting enough to keep my attention. Like, I'd probably give this more like 3.5 stars. But as far as like mystery thrillers go, you know, it was enough to keep my attention in. But I feel like I've read so many now that a lot of times I rarely give them super high ratings, just because I feel like a lot of them are kind of predictable, and in this case some of the things that did happen were predictable. I didn't predict everything, so that was good, and I feel like it was entertaining. So this is a mystery thriller that I wouldn't necessarily not recommend, but it's not like the first one that I would go to recommending to people. If you do like listening to audiobooks, I would recommend this as an audiobook because it does have a full cast of narrators with different voices, which makes it very interesting, and it's just a very quick, easy listen as an audiobook personally. It's even like one of those ones where, you know, even if your mind wanders a little bit, which usually happens to me when I'm listening to audiobooks, you can like easily jump back into the story and follow along with what's going on and not be like really confused and lost. Then the last book in the 3-star range we have is another audiobook I listened to from my library that I don't have the physical copy of. It's Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This book also came out this year, and it's kind of a more mystery, suspense, thriller-ish book. This is one of the rare cases where I gave a book 3 stars, and I do have plans on rereading it again in the future, because I feel like I didn't give the audiobook enough of my full attention. I just had a lot of stuff going on towards the end of November that I was just on my mind personally. So I didn't pay as much attention as I wish I had, and I did really feel like this book did some interesting things. I know a lot of people that are reviewing it are like, some people love it and some people just hated it, and I just feel like I need to read it again before I can give like my full complete thoughts on it. But it's very different, and I feel like it does something different. So we're following this couple, and they are staying at this Airbnb. They're like a middle-aged white couple, and they bring their teenage kids along with them. They're staying in this luxurious rental, and mysteriously they get a knock on their door in the middle of the night, and it's an older black couple, and they're claiming that this is their Airbnb and they need to stay the night there because all the power has gone out in New York and something is happening. They don't know what. They just need a place to stay. They can't make it back into the city, so they want to stay there with them. So we don't know whether to believe them or not. The couple doesn't know whether they're believing them or not. There's definitely some underlying racist and classist themes going on throughout the book as well. So this isn't just like your straightforward mystery thriller. And it was definitely a very interesting, I couldn't figure out myself, what I was believing. And I feel like this is a book I just definitely need to go back and reread. I feel like I'm still processing this book, and that I just, like I said, I just need to reread it again because I finished it and I was like, okay, this was definitely very interesting. I don't know why I don't feel like giving this like 4 or 5 stars, but I feel like if I read it again, I probably would bump up my ranking to closer to like a 4. I think maybe one of the things that prevented it from me from giving it a higher rating is I felt like something was missing, but I didn't know what exactly. But I just felt like this book could have been more than what it was, and it had such like a good potential that it was just a little bit of a letdown. But I just, like I said, I need to read it again. Then I have 2 books that I gave 4 stars to. Both of them were nonfiction books. So the first one is Cleopatra A Life by Stacy Schiff. I don't really know. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. This is a book about Cleopatra, and reading about Egypt and stuff is something that's always interested me ever since I was younger. And I feel like this is a book I would like to read again because there's just like so much information in here. And obviously all of it is not still in my head. This book was written by a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I feel like the book, I feel like it could have been written a little bit more, I don't know, accessibly, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like it's a very dense book, and you can't read through this quickly at all. It definitely took me a while to get through this book, and I've had this for a long time because there's multiple times I've tried to read this book and I just wasn't really able to get into it. This isn't one of those nonfiction books that I would recommend to everyone, mainly only if you're interested on the subject. And I feel like, I don't know if this is the best Cleopatra book out there. I know it's very like comprehensive and in-depth, but this isn't, I don't feel like the top tier one. I feel like there probably is better biographies on Cleopatra out there, in my personal opinion. Even though I haven't really read any other ones, I would be open to reading some other ones. In general, I would love to learn more about the history of that part of the world, specifically like around the Mediterranean. Like, I'm currently reading a book that's all about like ancient empires and stuff, and I feel like as I read more, it all kind of makes sense to me and is clicking together a little bit more. Cleopatra was the last queen of Egypt, so she's just such a fascinating person to think about and to imagine her life and to read about what her life was about. So if you are interested in Cleopatra, I would say maybe check out this book. I definitely, though, would like to read some other ones about her as well, so I can see, which one I feel like would be my go-to recommendation as my Cleopatra book. The other 4-star read that I read was Mad and Bad: Real Heroines of the Regency by Bia Koch. This was also a new release. I actually checked out the ebook from my library, and I got a couple chapters in, and I knew I was really enjoying the book and I wanted a physical copy, so I went to Barnes & Noble and was able to pick up this one there. This book is all about Regency England and maybe parts of it that you might not be as familiar with, which was everything pretty much for me. I am not super very familiar with the Regency period at all. I feel like if you are very familiar with this time, maybe this is not the book for you because you probably would know a lot of the stuff that's already in here. But for me, I feel like it was very well written. It was written in a way that made it interesting to me just as a normal person, not as like a scholar of the Regency era, but as just like, you know, a regular person who's kind of interested in that time. And basically the only person I'm really familiar with from that time is Jane Austen. Specifically, I found the chapter on women of color during the Regency period very interesting, and I would love to read other books that talk about that topic. And also what I really liked was there are a lot of book recommendations that the author gives in this book, so I'm definitely going to want to reread it again eventually and then see and pick out other books that she recommends that I would like to read too. And I can't remember if I said, but like with the writing in this book, it was very accessible. To me, I felt like this was written in a way that's very interesting. One complaint I had read that people complained about, so Be a Coach, she's one of the co-owners of The Ripped Bodice, which is a romance bookstore. So some people kind of have an issue with her kind of pushing like the Regency era romance, like the fiction books, but I feel like it makes sense because for her that is a passion for her, and it makes sense because that is what she does. Like she works at a romance bookstore. She works at a romance bookstore. So it makes sense that she would also want to give recommendations for fiction books as well as nonfiction that are centered around the Regency period. So I completely read my notes wrong, and this is why this makes sense. So I gave She-Wolves 4 stars, not 5 stars. I was like 4.5. It was really close, but I gave it 4 stars. She-Wolves, this was a nonfiction book, The Women Who Ruled England Before Elizabeth by Helen Castor. So this book is definitely one that I'm going to need to reread again in the future. This book starts off with the death of Edward VI in 1553 in England, and for the first time there would be a reigning queen, either Catherine of Aragon's daughter Mary, Anne Boleyn's daughter Elizabeth, Mary Queen of Scots, or Lady Greenjay. But then from there we go back in time to look at other influential women who were involved with the royalty of the crown, specifically Eleanor of Aquitaine, Isabella of France, Margaret of Anjou, and the Empress Matilda. And like I said, I would love to read this book again because there was just so much information that I just was not familiar with at all. So I have kind of confused, because I didn't know anything about either of the 4 women really, kind of the storylines kind of are a little bit jumbled up in my head now. So I would like to reread it again and possibly, you know, either watching some movies surrounding based off their lives, or even just reading other books that are specifically dedicated to each one of these women, because they were all very fascinating to read about. And like I said, I'm not very familiar with hardly anything, honestly, in fact, as history, because history was like one of my worst subjects in school, just because I feel like it's taught in such a boring way. I never paid attention, but now that I'm older, like I appreciate it more and I just want to know more about history. And so I really enjoyed this book. I would recommend, if you're into nonfiction, checking this out. It was really well written, and I feel like even though it was long, it didn't take me a long time to get through this book. Then finally on to the last 2 books, which I actually had 2 5-star reads, which I don't know, for me it's very rare that I give a book 5 stars, and I love when I do find books that I can honestly like 100% give 5-star with no doubts. We have The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. This is the epic story of America's Great Migration, and I have to say this is the probably best book I've read this whole year, and I never thought that a nonfiction book could actually be like my favorite book of the year. I don't think that's ever happened before, but this book is like nonfiction done perfectly. It reads so easily. It reads like you're reading a fiction book, that there are multiple times when I'm reading I had to think to myself, you know, this is actually a true book. This isn't just like made up stories and stuff. It was just 100% a recommend. I would recommend. This is one of the rare books that I would honestly recommend to everybody. There's not a single person that I don't think would not enjoy this book. Well, I'm sure there probably are people out there, but I personally myself do not know any. So this book is looking at the decades-long migration of Black citizens who fled the South for northern and western cities. There were over 6 million people from 1915 to 1970 that moved from the South, and we're following specifically the story arcs of 3 real-life people who moved from the South to different parts of the United States during different periods of the Great Migration. So one character moves to California, one to Chicago, I believe it was, and the other to New York. And through them we can see what life was like for them. First, just like living in the South and their journeys and kind of what led to them feeling like they had to leave the area that they're in. It was just so well done. Like, I don't want to give away, you know, things that happen, even though it's like a nonfiction book. I don't want to give away, you know, their storylines and stuff. I just found this book to be great, and it's like 500 pages, and I read through this so fast and didn't feel like a 500-page book at all. It was so enjoyable. I will for sure definitely be rereading this again in the future. Pick it up if it was on your radar. Even if it wasn't on your radar, pick this book up, because I just really love this so much. And when I eventually, probably in January, make my favorites of the year list, this book will be on there. It's funny, probably this book and this book will be on there for different reasons, as one of like my least favorite books of the year and one of my best favorite books of the year, all in 1 month. So you never know with books, really. But yes, Isabel Wilkerson, she can write, and I know she has that other book that just came out called Cast, and I can't wait to get to that book. Definitely it will have to be fit onto my TBR at some point in 2021, and I know that she's won awards for this book, and I'm pretty sure she will win many more awards for her writing, because her writing is just awesome. The other 5-star book, which I completely forgot over here, was Dear Reader by Kathy Rentzenbrink. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much. This one is 100% completely a 5-star read for me. I want to read other books by this author as well. It's funny because I read another book kind of centered around books. Well, I started it, I didn't finish it last month, and I feel like it was just like plodding along and taking me forever to get through, but this one was like the complete opposite. I love this book so much. If you guys are into books about books, I would highly recommend this book. We're following Kathy Rentzenbrink, and she's talking about the stories that she was into growing up, and just all about the comfort and joy of books. And I feel like there's so many books she talked about that I was familiar with, but then she also gives these recommendations at the end of each section on books, lists of books kind of centered around a certain theme. I'll just give you guys one example. So at the end of a section where she's talking about maybe a book that was centered around diary that was impactful on her life, she has a fictional diary section, and she gives recommendations of books that are centered around the whole theme of a fictional diary. And that's just like one example. Like, there's so many books. Like, I definitely am going to need to reread this to add so many of the book recommendations onto my list, and some of them were books I was already aware of that I wanted to read, so now I want to prioritize reading them sooner. So yeah, 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, whatever you want to rate it, I highly recommend this book. It's just really all about, like the title says, the comfort and joy of books, and how they can really just really change and shape your life, and tons of recommendations, like so many recommendations. You will find something in this book that you would want to look further into and read. So I would just, like I said, highly recommend. This book came out in 2020, this year. This is a new release for this year, and this is one of the cases where the book on the outside is just as beautiful on the inside. So those are all of the books that I read for the month of November. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and my December wrap up will be coming probably, hopefully not too far from now, in like another week or two, which is crazy. But that's it. Thanks for watching. Like I said, don't forget to check out my Depop and my Bookstagram account. I will leave the links down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!